The air smelled of fresh roses and expensive perfume. Sunlight streamed through the grand cathedral windows, casting golden patterns across the polished marble floor. The guests whispered in hushed excitement, their eyes fixed on the grand wooden doors at the end of the aisle. Amara stood just behind those doors, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. Her wedding gown was a masterpiece, ivory silk that clung to her figure before flowing into layers of soft tulle. A delicate veil cascaded down her back, and in her hands, she clutched a bouquet of white lilies and baby's breath. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Then she saw it. A single envelope, cream-colored with slightly worn edges, placed on the small velvet stool near the entrance. Her name was scrawled across it in handwriting she hadn't seen in years, familiar, aching, unforgettable. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, a distant buzzing filling her ears. The world around her faded, the chatter of guests, the soft melody of the string quartet, the waiting groom at the altar. She could only hear the sound of paper crinkling as she unfolded the letter. And then she read it. My Amara, if you're reading this, it means you're about to marry someone else. I should be happy for you, but I can't lie, not to you. Not when my heart still belongs to you. I never meant to leave you. I never meant to disappear from your life. But the truth you never knew is that I didn't have a choice. I was taken, forced away from everything I loved, away from you. By the time I had the chance to return, I thought it was too late. I thought you had moved on. I thought I had lost you forever. But today, I realized something. Love like ours doesn't just fade. And if there's even the smallest chance that you still love me, I need you to know, I am here, waiting, hoping. If your heart belongs to him, if you're happy, then walk down that aisle. But if there's even a part of you that still wonders about us, meet me at the place where it all began. I'll be waiting. Always. Lucas. Amara's breath hitched. The letter trembled in her hands. Lucas. The man she had mourned. The love she had lost. The one she had never truly been able to let go of. Her fiancé was waiting at the altar. Their life together, safe, certain, predictable, was just a few steps away. But outside, beyond these walls, in a place where memories still whispered, the past was waiting. Her first love was waiting. And she had to make a choice. Amara's fingers clenched around the letter as the weight of Lucas's words sank deep into her chest. The world around her felt like it had slowed, the walls of the cathedral closing in, suffocating her. Miss, it's time. The wedding coordinator's voice barely reached her ears. The doors would open in mere seconds. The music had shifted, signaling her entrance. Her fiancé, Daniel, was standing at the altar, waiting for her. She should walk forward. She had to walk forward. But her feet wouldn't move. Her eyes flickered back to the letter. I was taken, forced away from everything I loved, away from you. Amara's pulse pounded. For years, she had believed Lucas had left her by choice. That he had abandoned her. That he had walked away without a backward glance, leaving her to pick up the shattered pieces of her heart. She had spent so many nights wondering why. Wondering if she had been easy to forget. But now she knew the truth. He had never stopped loving her. And he was waiting. The memories flooded in long summer evenings beneath golden skies, stolen kisses by the lake, whispered promises under the stars. Lucas had been her world, her always. A tear slipped down her cheek. Daniel was good to her. He was kind, dependable, safe. He loved her in a way that was steady and unwavering. But could she ever love him with her whole heart, knowing now that Lucas had never truly left her? A decision had to be made. One step forward. Or one step back. Amara? A voice. Deep, gentle. She turned sharply. It was her father, standing beside her with worried eyes. Are you all right? Was she? Her fingers tightened around the letter as she looked up at him. If I leave now, if I walk away, will you hate me? Her voice trembled. His expression softened. He had watched her grieve for Lucas once. He had seen the light in her eyes dim when she lost him. Go, he whispered. If your heart is telling you to go, then run. Amara let out a shaky breath. The music swelled. The doors began to open. But instead of stepping forward, Amara turned. She lifted her dress, heart pounding, and ran. Gasps erupted behind her, voices calling out her name, but she didn't stop. Her heels clicked against the stone floors, her veil slipping from her hair as she burst out into the golden afternoon light. Her driver looked stunned as she yanked open the door. Where to miss? She swallowed the lump in her throat. There was only one place she needed to be: the lake. The car sped through winding roads, her heart racing faster than the engine. She had spent years thinking Lucas was gone. Years convincing herself that she had to move on. But love, real love, didn't fade. And when the car screeched to a halt at the edge of the familiar lake, her breath caught. He was there. Lucas. Standing beneath the old willow tree where they had shared their first kiss, his dark hair tousled by the breeze, his eyes searching. The moment he saw her, his face changed, hope, disbelief, something raw and aching flashing across his features. She stepped out, her wedding dress a stark contrast against the wild backdrop of nature. Neither of them spoke. Then he took a step toward her. Amara, his voice was hoarse, filled with years of unsaid words. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered the only thing that mattered. You came back. And in the next breath, she was in his arms. Lucas's arms wrapped around her, strong and real, as if holding her tightly could make up for all the years they had lost. Amara melted into his embrace, her body trembling with the weight of everything: love, regret, longing, and the deep, unshaken truth that she had never stopped loving him. His scent, a mix of rain and something unmistakably him, filled her senses, transporting her back to a time when the world had been simpler, when love had been enough. I thought I lost you forever, she whispered against his chest. Lucas pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers, as if trying to memorize every detail. I fought to come back to you, he murmured. Every single day. Her breath hitched. Tell me everything. Lucas exhaled, his hands still holding her as if afraid she would disappear. I never left you, Amara. That night, when I was supposed to meet you, I was taken. Her fingers curled against his shirt. Taken? He nodded, jaw tightening. I was forced into something I couldn't escape. I try to get back to you, I swear. But by the time I did, he swallowed hard. I saw you moving on. I thought you were happy, and I couldn't ruin that. Her chest ached. I was never happy without you. Her voice wavered. I tried. I really tried. He inhaled sharply, his forehead pressing against hers. Amara, if I had known, I would have fought harder. I would have never let you go. She closed her eyes, absorbing the warmth of his touch. I was about to marry someone else today. Lucas stiffened, his grip on her tightening. She pulled back slightly, searching his face. But then your letter came. She let out a shaky breath. And suddenly, none of it made sense anymore. Because the moment I saw your handwriting, I knew I couldn't go through with it. His hands trembled as he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Are you sure? She let out a breathless, tearful laugh. I ran out of my own wedding, Lucas. She reached up, touching his face, tracing the lines of the man she had loved for what felt like a lifetime. I think that says enough. A slow, relieved smile spread across his lips. So you're here. I'm here. And then, after years of silence, years of longing, years of believing they had lost each other, Lucas kissed her. It was desperate and deep, filled with everything they never got to say, everything they had lost and found again. The world faded, the past melted, and all that remained was them. When they finally broke apart, breathless and clinging to each other, Lucas whispered, I'm never letting you go again. And this time she believed him. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers as Amara leaned into Lucas's embrace, her heart still racing. It felt surreal, standing there in her wedding gown, with the man she had once thought was lost to her forever. A small, breathless laugh escaped her lips. I can't believe this is real. Lucas's grip tightened around her waist. It is. And I'm not letting you go again. His voice was rough, filled with a quiet intensity. But, Amara, are you ready for what comes next? Reality settled in like a slow, creeping tide. She had run out of her wedding. In front of everyone. Daniel. Her family. Hundreds of guests who had watched her bolt like a runaway bride in a movie. Oh, God. She groaned, pressing her fingers against her temples. I completely humiliated Daniel. He didn't deserve that. Lucas's jaw tightened. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. I won't tell you what to do, Amara. If you need to go back and explain. She shook her head fiercely. No, her eyes met his, steady and sure. I made my choice the moment I read your letter. I want to be here. Relief flashed across his face. But then he frowned. Then we need to leave. Someone will come looking for you soon. As if on cue, the distant roar of a car engine echoed in the distance. Panic shot through Amara. They're already coming. Lucas grabbed her hand. Come with me. Without another word, they ran. Through the tall grass, past the wildflowers, down the narrow dirt path that led into the woods. Amara's wedding gown snagged on branches, the delicate lace tearing as she kicked off her heels, but she didn't care. All that mattered was staying with Lucas. After what felt like forever, they finally reached his car, a sleek black motorcycle parked just off the road. Lucas tossed her a helmet. Get on. She hesitated for only a second before swinging her leg over, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist. The moment he revved the engine, a shiver ran down her spine. Not from fear, but from the thrill of the unknown. With a roar, the bike sped off, the wind whipping through her hair as they disappeared down the road, leaving her old life behind. It wasn't long before she saw them in the side mirrors. A black car, speeding toward them. Lucas cursed under his breath. They're following us. Amara's pulse spiked. Who? Not sure. He swerved sharply around a corner. But I have a feeling it's not just your family. Something cold slid down her spine. What do you mean? Lucas's grip tightened on the handlebars. Amara, there's something I didn't tell you. Her stomach dropped. Lucas. They didn't just take me away years ago. His voice was grim, edged with something dark. They forced me to work for them. And now that I've left, they want me back. Her heart pounded. Who are they? The black car sped up, getting closer. Lucas glanced at her over his shoulder, his expression hard. People you don't want to meet. A shot rang out. Amara barely had time to scream before Lucas swerved, the bullet missing them by inches. Hold on tight, he yelled. And just like that, her runaway wedding turned into a fight for survival. The tires screeched as Lucas leaned into a sharp turn, the motorcycle skidding onto a narrow dirt path. Amara clung to him, her heart hammering against her ribs. The black car behind them wasn't giving up. Another shot rang out. Are they shooting at us? Amara gasped. Lucas cursed. Yeah, and they're terrible at it. The bike hit a rough patch of road, making her grip tighten around his waist. This wasn't just a chase. This was a hunt. Lucas, who the hell are these people? She shouted over the roaring wind. His jaw clenched. The same people who took me away years ago. Her mind reeled. When Lucas disappeared, she thought he had just left, that he had moved on without her. But now he was being hunted like a fugitive. Hold on, he growled, twisting the throttle. The bike surged forward. The black car stayed on their tail. Lucas swerved onto an old wooden bridge that stretched over a deep river. Amara's stomach lurched as she saw the jagged rocks below. If they went over the edge. Lucas, they're not slowing down. I know. His voice was grim. Suddenly, the black car accelerated. Amara's breath caught. They were going to ram them off the bridge. At the last second, Lucas yanked the bike sideways. The tires screeched as they skidded across the wooden planks. The black car, unable to stop in time, slammed straight through the bridge's guardrail and plummeted into the river below. A massive splash erupted as the car disappeared beneath the waves. Lucas didn't slow. He sped off the bridge, disappearing into the forest on the other side. Only when they were deep into the trees did he finally pull over, killing the engine. Silence. The only sound was Amara's ragged breathing and the distant rush of the river. She slid off the bike, legs shaking, and turned to Lucas. "You need to tell me what's going on. Now." He ran a hand through his hair, still tense. "It's not safe here. We have to keep moving." She grabbed his arm. "Lucas, I just left my wedding. I just got shot at. A car just crashed into a river. And I don't even know why." He exhaled sharply. "I didn't just disappear, Amara. I was taken by a group that operates underground. They forced me into their world, one I couldn't escape." Her blood ran cold. What kind of world? His dark eyes met hers, filled with ghosts of the past. A world of crime, of power, secrets, and people who will kill to keep them. She took a shaky step back. "Lucas, are you a criminal?" He hesitated. "I did things to survive. Things I'm not proud of." His voice softened. "But I never stopped loving you." She swallowed hard. "And now they're after you?" "They don't let people leave, Amara." He cupped her face, his touch warm despite the cold truth in his words. "And now that you're with me, they'll come after you too." The weight of his words hit her like a tidal wave. Her old life, the simple, safe life she had built, was gone. There was no going back. She took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with quiet determination. "Then we run." A ghost of a smile played on his lips. "You sure?" She laced her fingers through his. "I didn't run from something today, Lucas. I ran to you." His grip tightened. "Then let's go." Together, they disappeared into the night. And the chase was only just beginning. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the glow of distant city lights barely visible beyond the trees. Lucas kept his grip steady on the handlebars, the motorcycle slicing through the night. Amara's heart still pounded from the chase, from the bullets, from the weight of the choice she had made. She had left behind a wedding, a stable future, and a man who probably still stood at the altar, wondering where it had all gone wrong. But this wild, uncertain road with Lucas felt more right than anything else ever had. She pressed her cheek against his back, gripping his jacket tighter. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Lucas said, voice firm. But she wasn't naive. Now that she knew the truth, she understood that safe was temporary. Whoever had been after him wasn't going to stop just because they crashed into a river. "Lucas." Her voice was quiet but insistent. "Tell me everything." He sighed, his body tensing against hers. "I was taken, Amara. Forced into a world I never wanted to be part of." Her fingers dug into his jacket. "What kind of world?" He hesitated for a long moment, then finally said, "A syndicate. They deal in weapons, smuggling, intelligence. I was valuable to them because of what I knew." A shiver ran down her spine. "And now they see me as a loose end." His voice darkened. "And they don't let loose ends live." The weight of his words settled over her. This wasn't just about them running. It was about survival. Amara exhaled, staring at the endless road ahead. "So, what's the plan?" Lucas glanced at her in the mirror, a small smirk tugging at his lips. "You're really all in, aren't you?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "I ran out of my wedding in a designer gown, dodged bullets, and jumped onto a motorcycle with you. I think that says enough." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes before he turned back to the road. "We lay low. I have a safe house a few towns over. We regroup there, figure out our next move." Safe house. Regroup. Next move. Amara's life had gone from wedding vows and champagne to secret hideouts and high-speed escapes in less than an hour. And yet, she felt more alive than she had in years. An hour later, Lucas pulled off the highway, winding down an isolated road leading to a small, cabin-like house tucked deep in the woods. The place was dark, hidden, and completely off the grid. "This is it?" she asked as they got off the bike. He nodded. "It's not much, but no one knows about it." As he unlocked the door, Amara glanced around. The night was eerily quiet, except for the distant chirping of crickets. Lucas flicked on a light inside. The place was simple, barely furnished, with a worn-out couch, a small kitchen, and a bedroom in the back. She crossed her arms. "So, how long have you had this secret hideout?" He smirked. "Long enough." Amara watched as he locked the doors, checking the windows like a man who had spent his life watching his back. It hit her then. Lucas wasn't just a man on the run. He was a man who had been surviving for years. She stepped closer. "Lucas, what did they do to you?" He paused, his back to her, shoulders tense. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "They made me into someone else." Her heart ached at the rawness in his tone. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "No," she whispered. "You're still you, no matter what they did." He turned, and for the first time, she saw it. The exhaustion, the pain, the years of fighting alone. Then, before she could say another word, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't rushed. It was relief. Like he had been holding himself together for too long, and now, finally, he didn't have to anymore. She wrapped her arms around him, resting her forehead against his chest. "We'll figure this out," she murmured. Lucas's fingers traced her spine, his voice low and filled with something unspoken. "I just got you back, Amara. I'm not losing you again." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Then don't let me go." And this time he didn't. As the night stretched on, neither of them knew what the future held, only that, for the first time in years, they weren't facing it alone. The warmth of Lucas's embrace lingered even as Amara sat on the worn-out couch, her thoughts racing. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, the night stretching endlessly around them. She should have been exhausted. She should have been overwhelmed. Instead, her pulse thrummed with anticipation. Lucas had survived years of running, of hiding, of living in the shadows. And now, for the first time, he wasn't alone. But the moment of peace shattered with a single knock at the door. A slow, deliberate knock. Lucas tensed instantly, his entire body going rigid. His hand was on his gun in seconds, and he motioned for Amara to stay quiet. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. The knock came again, 3 times. Rhythmic, almost practiced. Lucas moved silently, pressing his back against the wall as he peeked out the window. His jaw tightened. "Who is it?" Amara whispered. His voice was grim. "Someone I never wanted to see again." Before she could process his words, a deep voice cut through the silence from the other side of the door. "Lucas, open the door. Or, do you want me to do it for you?" A chill ran down Amara's spine. The voice was smooth, controlled, but laced with an unspoken threat. Lucas exhaled sharply, his grip on the gun tightening. Then, to her shock, he unlocked the door. It swung open, revealing a man dressed in all black. He was tall, his presence commanding, with dark eyes that held no warmth. A jagged scar ran down the side of his face, disappearing beneath the collar of his jacket. He smirked. "Missed me?" Lucas's expression was unreadable. "I should have known you'd come." The man stepped inside as if he owned the place, his gaze flicking briefly to Amara. "I see you brought a guest. How romantic." Amara swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his stare. "Who are you?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "She doesn't know, does she?" His eyes gleamed with something dark. "Oh, Lucas. You really haven't told her everything." Lucas's jaw clenched. "Say what you came to say, and leave." The man ignored him, stepping closer to Amara. "I'm Adrian, Lucas's brother." Amara's breath caught. "Brother?" Her wide eyes darted to Lucas, but he said nothing. His silence was an answer in itself. Adrian tilted his head, studying her. "I wonder, does she know what you really did?" Lucas's voice was low, dangerous. "Leave her out of this." Adrian smirked. "Too late." Then, in a chillingly calm voice, he said, "You have exactly 24 hours to come back, or I kill her." Amara's blood turned to ice. Lucas didn't hesitate. He grabbed Adrian by the collar, slamming him against the wall, his gun pressed to his temple. "You touch her, and I'll put a bullet between your eyes." Adrian didn't flinch. He simply chuckled. There's the Lucas I remember. His gaze flickered to Amara, amusement dancing in his dark eyes. He didn't tell you, did he? The real reason he left? The real reason they took him? Amara's voice was barely above a whisper. What are you talking about? Adrian grinned, his teeth flashing like a predator toying with its prey. Your dear Lucas didn't just work for them, sweetheart. His voice dripped with cruel amusement. He killed for them. Silence. Amara felt like the air had been stolen from her lungs. Her gaze snapped to Lucas, searching his face for denial, for anything. But he just stood there, fists clenched, muscles tense. He didn't deny it. Adrian smirked. And now, they want their best assassin back. Lucas's voice was like steel. I'm not that man anymore. Adrian shrugged. Then I guess she dies. Amara's world spun. Lucas. The man she had loved. The man she had trusted. A killer. She took a step back. Tell me it's not true. Lucas's eyes met hers, filled with something unreadable. Regret. Guilt. But not denial. Her stomach twisted. Oh my God. Adrian clapped his hands. This is fun. But time's ticking, Lucas. Make your choice. He turned, walking toward the door before pausing. Oh, and if you try to run again? They'll send someone worse than me next time. With that, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a deadly ultimatum. Lucas had 24 hours, and Amara no longer knew if she could trust the man standing before her. Silence stretched between them after Adrian left, thick with tension and unspoken words. Amara's chest rose and fell rapidly, her mind racing with the weight of what she had just learned. Lucas. The man she loved. The man she had trusted. A killer. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself, stepping back. Tell me it's not true, she whispered. Lucas didn't move. He just stood there, his face unreadable. His silence was an answer. A bitter laugh bubbled up in her throat. God, I'm so stupid. I ran from my wedding straight into the arms of a murderer. Lucas's eyes darkened. Amara. Don't. Her voice wavered, but she held up a hand, stopping him. Don't lie to me. Not now. I need the truth. His jaw clenched. Then, in a low, broken voice, he said, Yes. Her breath hitched. Yes. The word rang in her ears, shattering the fragile hope she had been holding on to. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his expression strained. But it wasn't by choice. Amara's stomach churned. You killed people, Lucas. I did. His voice was raw. Because if I didn't, they would have killed me. She shook her head, stepping away again. You should have told me. Instead, you let me fall for you all over again, thinking you were someone you weren't. He flinched. I am still me. She let out a bitter laugh. No, Lucas. The man I loved wouldn't have blood on his hands. His expression darkened, his fists clenching at his sides. You think I wanted this? He growled. I was taken, Amara. Forced into a world where it was kill or be killed. And the only reason I survived was because I was good at it. Her heart ached at the pain in his voice, but she couldn't ignore the fear clawing at her chest. How many? She whispered. Lucas hesitated. How many, Lucas? His Adam's apple bobbed. Too many. She let out a shaky breath, turning away, trying to process everything. Then she remembered Adrian's words. They want their best assassin back. Her blood ran cold. She turned back to Lucas. Are you going back? His gaze flickered with something unreadable. If I don't, they'll come after you. Her stomach twisted. So what? You just go back to that life? Start killing again. Lucas's hands balled into fists. If it means keeping you alive? Yes. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. I don't want that. His jaw tightened. Then tell me what to do, Amara. Because if I don't go, they'll kill you. And I can't, his voice broke. I can't let that happen. The pain in his eyes shattered something inside her. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was a game they had been dragged into, and the only way out was through blood and sacrifice. She closed her eyes, inhaling shakily. Then, when she opened them, her voice was steady. "We run." Lucas's expression turned grim. "They'll find us. Then we make sure they don't." She took a step closer, gripping his hands. "You're not the same man they turned you into, Lucas. You left. You escaped. And I won't let them take you back." His eyes searched hers, something like hope flickering beneath the torment. "You're really willing to do this? To run with me?"
She squeezed his hands.
"I ran to you once. I won't run from you now." His breath shuddered, and for the first time, a crack appeared in his tough exterior. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to this world. "Then let's disappear." As they stood there, the night stretching endlessly around them, one thing became clear. They weren't just running. They were fighting for their lives. Lucas wasted no time. Within minutes, he had gathered supplies, money, weapons, burner phones. Amara watched as he moved with precision, his every action controlled, practiced. This wasn't the man she had loved years ago. This was a man who had been trained to survive. "We have a few hours before they track us," he said, strapping a knife to his ankle. "Adrian won't wait long." Amara swallowed hard. "Where do we go?" Lucas hesitated.
"South."
"There's a contact in Mexico who can get us off the grid. New identities, safe houses." She exhaled sharply. "We just leave everything behind?" Lucas's gaze softened. "We don't have a choice." Amara glanced around the small apartment. It wasn't hers, but it had become her refuge in the last few hours. And yet, none of it mattered if she wasn't safe. She took a deep breath. "Then let's go." Lucas nodded, grabbing a duffel bag. "Stick close to me. No matter what happens, don't stop. Don't look back." A chill ran down her spine. What kind of life is this? But there was no time for doubts. Lucas led her out through the back door, his steps soundless. The streets were quiet, the night heavy with tension. They slipped into an alley, the car he had stashed earlier waiting for them. Amara barely had time to get in before Lucas started the engine. They sped off into the darkness. 1 hour later, the highway stretched endlessly before them, the city lights fading in the distance. Amara kept stealing glances at Lucas, her mind still reeling from everything. Finally, she spoke. "Tell me the truth. Do you think we'll make it?" Lucas tightened his grip on the wheel. "I don't know." The honesty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. For a few minutes, they drove in silence. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Then Lucas's phone vibrated. He glanced at it and cursed under his breath. "What?" Amara asked. He turned the phone toward her. "A message. Unknown number. You didn't really think you could outrun us, did you?" Amara's blood turned to ice. Before she could react, headlights flooded the rearview mirror. A black SUV was speeding toward them.
"Fast."
Lucas slammed his foot on the gas. "Hold on." The car roared forward, but the SUV kept pace. Then the first shot rang out. Glass shattered. Amara screamed, ducking instinctively as the bullet barely missed her. Lucas swerved the car violently, trying to shake them off. "Damn it." More gunshots. The side mirror exploded. "They're trying to force us off the road," Amara yelled. Lucas gritted his teeth. "Not happening." He jerked the wheel sharply, taking the car off the highway and onto a dirt road. The tires skidded, kicking up dust and gravel. The SUV followed. Amara's heart pounded. "They're not backing off." Lucas's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. His expression hardened. "I need you to trust me." Her stomach flipped. "What are you?" Before she could finish, Lucas suddenly slammed the brakes. The car screeched to a halt. The SUV, unable to react in time, barreled forward, straight into a ditch. A sickening crash echoed through the night. For a few seconds, silence. Then movement. "They're still alive," Lucas muttered, grabbing his gun. Amara's pulse spiked. "We need to run." Lucas turned to her, his expression dark. "No. We finish this." Lucas pushed open the car door, his movements swift and calculated. The crash had bought them seconds, maybe a minute, before their attackers recovered. That wasn't enough time to run. Amara's breath came in short, panicked gasps. "Lucas, we need to go." He didn't take his eyes off the wreckage. Smoke billowed from the SUV's crushed hood, but the doors were already being forced open. Shadows moved inside. "They won't stop," he said, his voice eerily calm. He pulled a silencer from his duffel, screwing it onto the gun with practiced ease. "Not unless I make them." A shiver ran down Amara's spine. This was a side of him she had never seen before.
Cold. Precise.
Dangerous. But before she could protest, he was already moving. She clenched her fists. "I can't just sit here." She reached into the glove compartment, fingers closing around a small knife. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then the first attacker stepped out of the SUV. A tall, broad-shouldered man dressed in black, a gun in his grip. His face was partially covered by a mask, but his stance was unmistakable, trained, disciplined. Lucas didn't hesitate. 2 silent shots. The man crumpled to the ground. Amara swallowed hard. The second man lunged out from the wreckage, firing wildly. Lucas ducked, rolling behind cover as bullets whizzed past. Amara's pulse pounded in her ears. She barely had time to react before a third attacker appeared, this one closer, coming from the passenger side of the SUV. His eyes locked onto hers. And then he was charging straight for her.
No.
No, no, no. Her instincts kicked in. She threw herself backward just as he reached her, his arm swinging to grab her. She barely managed to slash out with the knife, the blade slicing across his forearm. He grunted, but didn't slow down. His hand closed around her wrist, yanking her forward. The knife slipped from her grasp. "Let go," she screamed, struggling. The man sneered. "Big mistake, sweetheart." Then a gun pressed against his temple.
Click.
Lucas's voice was ice cold. "Let her go." The man stiffened, his grip loosening. Amara ripped herself free, stumbling back just as Lucas pulled the trigger. The body hit the dirt. Silence. Amara's breath came in harsh gasps. The scent of gunpowder filled the air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Lucas turned to her, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her hands still trembling. "I know. I'm fine." His jaw clenched, but he nodded. Then he grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the car. "We need to move." "What if there are more?" she asked, glancing at the wreckage. Lucas didn't look back. "Then we kill them too." 30 minutes later, they ditched the car near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of a small town, changing into fresh clothes from Lucas's bag. Amara's hands were still shaking as she pulled on a hoodie, her mind replaying the fight over and over. She had nearly died. Again. Lucas stood by the window, gun in hand, watching the road. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set. "They won't stop coming," she said softly. He didn't turn.
No.
She hesitated before stepping closer. "Then what do we do?" Lucas exhaled slowly. "We stop running." Amara's heart skipped a beat. "You mean?" He finally turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I'm done hiding. If they want a war, I'll give them one." She shivered at the cold determination in his voice. But deep down she knew he was right. Running hadn't worked. Hiding hadn't worked. If they wanted to survive, if they wanted a real future, they had to fight. Amara tightened her grip on the gun Lucas had given her, the cold metal pressing against her palm. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. She was supposed to be married by now, living a peaceful life far away from gunfire and shadows. Instead, she was here, preparing for a war she never wanted. Lucas finished loading his weapons, his expression unreadable. "We have one shot at this." Amara swallowed hard. "You really think we can take them down?" His eyes met hers, dark and determined. "We don't have a choice." A part of her still couldn't believe it. The organization that had taken Lucas, turned him into a killer, was still out there, hunting them, trying to reclaim their best assassin. But they had made one mistake. They underestimated him. And they underestimated her. Lucas's plan was simple. Lure them in. Kill them all. It was risky, dangerous, but it was their only chance. They chose an abandoned shipping yard on the outskirts of the city, isolated, with plenty of cover. Lucas had rigged the area with explosives, hidden vantage points, and escape routes. Now all that was left was waiting. Amara's heart pounded as she crouched behind a shipping container, gripping her gun tightly. The night air was thick with tension. Then, engines roared in the distance. "They're here," Lucas murmured through the earpiece. Amara's grip tightened. A convoy of black SUVs pulled into the yard. Doors slammed open. And then, Adrian stepped out. Amara's breath caught. She hadn't seen him since the night he told her the truth about Lucas. But now, standing here, surrounded by a dozen armed men, he looked like a different person. Colder. More dangerous. He looked around, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Lucas," he called out. His voice was calm, confident. "I know you're here. No more games. Let's end this." Silence. Then Lucas stepped into the light, gun in hand. Amara held her breath. Adrian smirked. "I told you you couldn't run forever." Lucas's voice was steady. "I'm not running." Adrian chuckled. "Good. Neither are we." Then he raised his hand, and his men opened fire. Lucas dove for cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Bullets ricocheted off metal, sparks flying in the darkness. Amara's heart pounded as she pressed herself against the container.
Breathe. Stay calm.
She raised her gun and fired. One shot. A man went down. Another fired in her direction, barely missing. She ducked, her pulse racing. Then Lucas's voice came through the earpiece.
"Now."
Amara didn't hesitate. She pressed the detonator.
Boom.
Explosions rocked the yard as fire erupted, engulfing 2 SUVs. The shockwave sent several men flying. Screams filled the air. Chaos. Smoke. Gunfire. Lucas took advantage of the confusion, taking down 3 men before they could react. Adrian cursed, stumbling back. "Kill them," he roared. But his men were already losing. Amara moved quickly, staying low, taking shots where she could. Her hand shook, but she didn't stop. Then, she felt a gun press against her back. "Drop it." Her blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Adrian. Slowly, she raised her hands, her gun slipping from her grip. Lucas turned, his eyes widening when he saw Adrian holding her hostage. "Let her go," Lucas growled, his gun trained on him. Adrian smirked. "You know how this ends, Lucas. You come with me, or she dies." Lucas's hand tightened around his gun. His body was tense, his mind racing. Then, Amara moved. In one swift motion, she elbowed Adrian in the stomach, knocking his gun arm to the side. Lucas fired. The bullet hit Adrian square in the chest. He staggered, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the ground. Silence. Amara's breathing was ragged as she turned to Lucas. "It's over," she whispered. Lucas's eyes searched hers. Then he pulled her into his arms. For the first time in years, the weight of the past lifted. The people who hunted them were gone. The nightmare was over. And for the first time, they were free. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the quiet beach. The waves rolled gently, the air warm and salty. Amara sat on the sand, watching as Lucas approached with 2 drinks in hand. "You look lost in thought," he said, sitting beside her. She smiled softly. "Just thinking about how much has changed." Lucas handed her a drink, his fingers brushing hers. "Regrets?" She shook her head. "None." A year ago, they had walked away from everything, changed their identities, left the past behind. Now they had a quiet life. No more running. No more hiding.
Just them.
Lucas reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "No more ghosts," he murmured. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. No more ghosts. And for the first time in a long time, she finally felt at peace. Thanks for watching. For more stories, please subscribe Eververse Novel.